I said to Janet earlier, the sign of a successful conference is that there's already conversations about the next biennial conference and people who are thinking about actually planning the next biennial conference. So I have to say that that absolutely is the sign of a successful conference. So thank you once again for your hospitality, generosity, and consideration. I have the daunting task, actually, of trying to summarize Plenary 1 in 5 minutes or less. So I'm going to go fast, speak fast, and do this fast so we make sure that we get to the other speakers today. So I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Plenary 1 papers. I'm going to start with a cliche that we've heard over and over and over again. We live in challenging times, and it's not just because I have 5 minutes to do this, but because we can see that right now we live in times of shifting work, of the idea of work shifting. Shifting in the nature and type of work, shifting from one country to another in a global marketplace, shifting our perception of what used to be stable sources of work, and shifting notions of what work produces. So the Plenary 1 speakers, I think, really remind us of why theory really matters when discussing this shifting nature of work. They reminded us that theory provides stability we need to our work to help others with their work needs. It anchors our work in history, but also looks to how vocational psychology can adapt and remain relevant in these challenging times. So this brings me to a small summary of some of the things we heard. I'm not going to do justice to those papers, so I apologize in advance. But I know that I get to write a chapter on this, and that's pretty exciting, so I can expand upon some of these ideas. Three themes that really came from these papers that as I was reading them and listening to the speakers and listening to even folks here at the conference. So number one is we live in challenging times. Did I already say that? I think I did. Okay. We have good theories to help us understand how to help people through these challenging times. And we need to be doing more to use our theories in research and practice in a publicly engaged way. And I think we've heard this kind of concept over and over again of integrating research, theory, and practice. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how I think that can be done through what we call publicly engaged scholarship. And that's scholarship where practitioners, theorists, researchers are working together to actually produce knowledge that is relevant to the public. And how we do this, I think some of the suggestions came out of Plenary 1 speakers. So I think about what Bob Lent talked about, and one of the takeaways from his presentation for me was really this idea of public policy. And we've heard over and over again other people talking about it as well, is that NCDA has been doing this for years. We had a great conversation, the SVP chair, myself and Pat, talking to the presidents of NCDA and the officers of NCDA about how we can collaborate in the areas of public policy. And that, to me, is where really research, theory, and practice meet together, because we all need funding for our work. We all want to influence the discourse on what meaningful work means in people's lives, and public policy is a really good place for us to do that. Second, Wendy Patton and Mary McMahon remind us of the systemic theory framework that offers a place of convergence of theory and practice. They offer this holistic framework that really can be very much synthesized with other theories. But they also pay attention to those contextual factors, the economic factors, for example, that are going on in our country that affect people's work lives. So I appreciated their attention to those macro level factors that we need to also be paying attention to. Third, Bob Reardon reminds us of one of the most prolific theories of our time, Holland's theory, and the simplicity of Holland's theory, and the importance of that simplicity in use with our clients, that it does matter to them to understand themselves better. It does matter to them to understand their interests. While we cannot rely solely on interest to drive understanding of work or their needs, it still does matter that people want to better understand themselves in relation to work, and interests help us do that. I always think whenever I teach about Holland's theory, one of my favorite things to say is, we see it everywhere. It is everywhere, and I think Bob Reardon talked about it. Even when you watch an episode of Friends, it is there. We can dispute about who's what, but it's there. Mary Sue Richardson offered us a really important conversation about disruptive discourse and counseling through her discussion of unpaid care work and counseling for work and relationships. And this was probably one of the most meaningful things yesterday that I did. Was Sue Moltoski and I had a really meaningful conversation yesterday about what unpaid care work is and what it means to our lives. And I think we can all agree that that is something that needs more attention, that we need to be discussing more, because it takes a lot of skill. Even though we don't consider a lot of the times caregiving work, it is work. Think about the skills that it takes: interpersonal skills, knowledge, the ability to organize, navigate difficult situations. All of those are skills that don't get, I think, as much recognition as they need to, and I really appreciated her bringing that to our attention. Finally, Jim Sampson, I think, provided an excellent set of recommendations for the future that have direct relevance and change and direct relevance in terms of collaborative relationships among practitioners and researchers. When he talked about this idea of laboratories, and of course, you know, their living laboratory right here in the FSU's Career Center that we all got to see and experience, I think is really important. I'd love to see us do that in communities as well. Earlier I talked about some of the things we're trying to do in the public library in Iowa City to try to provide employment services, employment counseling to folks who have been displaced or unemployed, or who are currently homeless. And I think that there's an opportunity there for obviously some meaningful practice that is very publicly engaged and helps the community, but also opportunities for research on the meaning of work in people's lives who may not have a lot of attention in terms of some of the vocational research that we've been doing. So I think that those are some takeaways that I had. One last thing that I will leave us with in terms of an idea of publicly engaged scholarship is Lisa Flores, who I'm not summarizing her work, but I will just talk about real briefly, talked about impact factor in our journals, which is very important for us as researchers. But what if we actually try to create something called a community impact factor, where we looked at the impact of our work on different communities, and the communities rated us in terms of that? I think we could broaden the discourse. We could become a little bit more publicly engaged, and we could help to really bridge that gap in terms of research and practice and theory. So thank you.